morning. Good, not too bad. Okay. Wilkuma. I don't know if you know the word Wilkuma, but Wilkuma is Old English, and it's the origin of the word welcome. And Wilkuma actually means it gives me great pleasure in being in your presence. So thank you. We're going to tackle this interesting topic called the art of asking. And I suppose I just want to start with this observation that I was doing some work in Canada with a particular individual, and we got talking about this thing called asking. And it got me interested to the extent where I was looking at academic books in regards to community development, etc. And I've only been able to find one book in the world that has asking in the index of a human service text. One book that has the word asking in the index of human service books. And yet it's one of the most essential aspects of our work, isn't it? But there's been no attention being given to it. What I want to do is to work through this fairly quickly and I suppose get to some of the practical stuff which I'm sure you're most interested in. But let's start off with perhaps a definition of what is asking. So asking is the deliberate and conscious act of approaching others and in so doing seeking an involvement that previously wasn't there. Interesting definition, isn't it? But I think it's wrong. And I wrote this, but I think it's wrong. The reason why it's wrong is this. I've been worrying about this over the last few weeks, and I think it needs to be added. This needs to be added to this definition, or one that once was. Because quite often what happens is that there is, and I'm thinking particularly people who may acquire a disability. You know, there's a life, there's a rhythm, and suddenly they acquire a disability, and all of a sudden they're going on, but many of the relationships that they once had are being left behind. So perhaps asking is not just about new relationships, but it's also about re-establishing old relationships in a person's life. So why is this theme so important? And here are some observations. The first one being that opportunities have been denied if asking is not implemented. We live in a world of shared interests. In Townsville, we had this really unusual, I shouldn't have said that, I'm sure for people who are involved it's not unusual at all, but those model trains, and when I'm talking about model train, you know, the actual train itself is about this wide, and about 4 feet or 5 feet long, and they run along the little track in a circle, or whatever. Well, we've got one of those in Townsville. It's very popular, very, very popular. And they have these big adults who sit on this little train, all dressed up, of course, and go around the train. Now, what I find really interesting about that particular activity is that their passion and interest, and their common interest is around that train topic. Now, you can have doctors, you can have unemployed people, you can have a whole mixture of people involved in that activity. So when people share a common interest, whether it be Ian or Cassie, the difference actually doesn't go away, but it softens to a certain extent because of that shared interest. All people have gifts, talents and contributions to offer, and people actually experience interdependence via roles, and there's been a lot of discussion about roles, but I think there needs to be more discussion about interdependence, about that opportunity for people to have reciprocal relationships, and asking, of course, is a precursor to that. And finally, asking is important because it's all about relationships, and relationships. But there's more. That some community members are willing and waiting to be asked. I wonder why I said some community members are willing and waiting to be asked. This next one is absolutely fascinating, that 70% of funded participants in the NDIS trial sites in Australia identified civic, social and community participation as a priority, one of their top 3 priorities. 7% of funded participants in the NDIS trial sites in Australia identified civic, social and community participation as a priority. I've worked in this area for 35 years in this one. That was always down the bottom of the priorities within the service world. But when we come to the needs and priorities of individuals within services, they're saying, no, this is the priority in our life. Once again, for people who experience civic, social and community participation, it would appear that the act of asking may be required. And finally, there is a consequence if you don't. Some of you many of you heard of John O'Brien? John O'Brien is really one of the creators in some ways of person-centered planning. American guy. And Mike Green, he works with the ABCD Institute in Chicago. You might want to write that down if you want to follow up asset-based community development, which obviously I'm a great fan of. But if you Google asset-based community development, John McKnight, he's actually retired from his professorship, but he's still involved. And if you Google Mike Green, also within ABCD, you'll see reference to them. John O'Brien, being one of the leading introducers of person-centered planning, has an interesting quote. He said, "Person-centered planning isn't enough." Person-centered planning isn't enough. What he was actually referring to is that community work needs to work alongside it and with it if true inclusion is going to be possible. I'm doing some work in New South Wales with a particular organisation, and it's the only organisation that I have encountered that actually has identified community development as being a focus of their training. Never ever run a community development particular component of work with organisations as committed. So the issue of community development and community participation is really important. So once again, if we look at the definition of community inclusion, when people experience positive relationships in community whereby their gifts, talents and contributions are valued, acknowledged, encouraged, supported and rewarded, we once again realise that this is not possible without being as prepared. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is, this is participation time. I want you to grab the yellow card that you have there, and I want you to trace around your hand. Just put your hand on that. And trace it around. I did this presentation at a butcher's convention and this didn't work. Thanks for laughing. Some people don't laugh. Okay. When I also did this the first time, I had a look at my fingers and I thought I had arthritis, but then I realised it was my wedding ring. Okay, what I want to do is to invite you to use this symbol of the hand as a means of reminding what the art of asking may comprise of. So the first one that I wish to draw your attention to is the thumb. So can you please show me your thumbs? Come on, do it to me. There you are. Okay, all right, good. Now the first one actually refers to the concept of starting with why. Have any of you heard of a guy called Simon Sinek? S-I-N-E-K. Simon Sinek, have any of you heard of TED Talks?
Yes.
Simon Sinek has one of the highest, I should say, participation, number of audience. He's had millions and millions of people who have listened to his particular presentation. He's written a book called Start With Why, and it seems to be highly relevant to actually this topic, because unless we know why we're doing it, all the rest seems to be quite relevant. Why becomes the motivator to the act of asking. So So I suppose in some ways we're keen to actually look at starting with why so that we may go from good to great outcomes. The role of visualisation is in being prepared is important. We need to keep the end in sight, as Stephen Covey says. Now, I want you to reflect just briefly. I want you to think of an activity that you do, that you choose to do and have chosen to do, that you do on a regular and ongoing basis. Just mentally visualise that. Something you do on a regular and ongoing basis that is important to you, maybe even critical to you, and involve other people, etc. And now I'm going to overlay what we call the 4 stages of leisure on top of that. And I want you to think of these stages in regards to what you thought of. The first one is the issue of anticipation. Anticipating for that event or that experience. Does that make sense? You know, there's a sense of anticipation. It's a priority in your life, etc. The second one is about preparation. You know, actually preparing for that. You know, for a person playing sport, it might be making sure your uniform is right and you know you've eaten the right meal before you play, etc. The next one is the event itself. You know, and the last one is about reflection, about reflecting on that experience. I walked across England a number of years ago. It took me 14 days. The anticipation was very exciting. I spent 12 months preparing for it. The spare bedroom had all the stuff laid out on it. You know, 12 months ahead of time, I'm walking poles and I'm walking socks and I'm walking boots. You know, the preparation of training for that walk was very intensive. Walking from one end of the island and back again a few times. The event was disastrous. It was absolutely painful and disastrous. It didn't match what I thought it was going to be. The bottom of my feet actually came off as a result of the water and slush that I was walking through. But you know what? I'm talking about it, aren't I? The reflection was a really, really important part of the process. So visualisation and being prepared is an important part of the asking process. This card, which perhaps we might give out now, this card is a fantastic tool. It was developed originally by NICAN, the National Information Communication Awareness Network, which has since closed in Canberra. But it's a powerful explanation for why we need to be clear about the why. Asking is important. So if you look at those characteristics on my right-hand side, your left-hand side of the card, you look at the characteristics that people may experience when they're not members of their community. Just have a look at those. When they're not members of their community. Hands up those who in the work that you may be working with, or even within your families, that you know people who have experienced some of those. The issue of loneliness, the issue of dependence on services, of being controlled, of having no sense of future, or even maybe poor health as a result of not having strong community connection. But the interesting thing is that there is capacity to see the power of community when we go to the other side of the card. Because we know that when one does experience the sense of belonging to and being part of a community, one is addressing the threat of a feeling of separateness from the real world. Now, it probably doesn't surprise you, but the power of 10 that I have an absolute passion for, you're probably aware of that. The power of 10 encouraged me at one stage when I was overseas on holiday with my wife. I didn't tell her that I was going to do this. I put this card in a little notebook in my case, and when I found a rare moment, I'll sneak off and write about this card. And if you're interested, if you go into the Inclusion Works website, you'll see a document called Confessions from a Postcard. Now, what I did in that Confessions from a Postcard report, I challenged myself with this question. And the question is this: what are 10 ways in which I have contributed to, or I am at risk of contributing to, every one of these on the left-hand side? All those negative ones. What are 10 ways in which I have contributed to a person's feeling of separateness from the real world, or I'm at risk of contributing to that? So if you're good at maths and you know there are 10 here, I identified 10 ways, 100 ways in which I either have contributed or I was at risk of contributing to these characteristics. Pretty confronting, isn't it, when you do that? But it's a powerful exercise. But the good side of the story is I did it also on the other side. What are 10 different ways in which I have contributed to the positive aspects of community life? That also provides you with a clear explanation as to why it's important. Let's show me your next finger, the pointer. Okay. I know what you're worrying about when I get to the middle finger, but we'll wait till we get to there, okay? The pointer is actually asking, what are you going to ask for? We need to be conscious of what we're asking for, because that also relates to the why, doesn't it? The what has to be a means of the why being achieved. And this is probably not rocket science either. Perhaps what we're asking for is what the other is seeking. And some I work with individuals with disabilities and asking them what would a good life look like. You know what a lot of people say? What my brother or what my sister has. You know, because what the other person is wanting within their life. An everyday life, a powerful life, and perhaps full participation with shared support. Full participation with shared support. But we also need to be here, you need to be aware of the, isn't this a great slide? Okay? It took me about a month to figure out how to do this. The big ask. What we mean by the big ask is that sometimes in our asking, we can actually ask too much of people at the wrong time in the wrong place. Let me just give you an example of this. Paula was a young woman in a regional town in Victoria who had a car accident, and the consequence of that car had high-level quadriplegia. She was living in the local aged care facility, and she was 24 years of age. Of course, an aged care facility is the wrong place for a 24-year-old young woman to be, particularly a person who grew up within this community and was known by way of a previous life. She was a great horsewoman, she was heavily involved in rural life, etc. And one of the avenues for her community reconnecting was a group called the Young Farmers Association, which is is there Young Farmers Associations in New South Wales? And anyway, there was an idea that perhaps Paula could reconnect with her previous identity through the Young Farmers Association. Now, I heard this story in regards to a worker who was planning it, and he said, what I need to do is to be upfront and actually say the president of the Young Farmers Association, now would you be willing to assist Paula to be a member of your club? Paula has a significant disability. She has high-level quadriplegia, which restricts her movement. She needs assistance with personal care, with nutrition needs. Her level of confidence is actually quite seriously dropped as a result of the experience. And by the way, she's dependent on a ventilator which is located under the chair, and it makes a large sucking sort of noise. Now, where do you think the president of the Young Farmers Association is at this stage? The president who's gone. He's just done a runner. Because this was probably a very good example of what Gina would present as not a deliberate and intentional celebration of a person's deficits. The introduction could have gone the other way, couldn't it? Paula has lived in this community all her life. She knows she has good knowledge to contribute to the Young Farmers Association. She did this in the community, did that in the community, and reminded people of, in fact, who she was. And not just that, but who she is now. So we can actually distance people, and in distancing people, excluding people through what we ask for, how much we ask for. There are strategies around that whereby we might identify the needs, and in this particular situation, what eventually happened was the issue of personal needs was only managed prior to her involvement in the Young Farmers Association. The hospital was able to provide, there wasn't a maxi taxi within the community. The hospital provided transport to get her to the local showgrounds where the group met. There was a person within the club who actually accepted the role of being the greeter, so that when she arrived, she was invited into the group, but also introduced to other people in the group. You know, Lions clubs and Rotary clubs do that very well. They actually have a person to welcome you, welcome guests, and introduce them in. There were people who were assisting her with other needs. Many of those needs were able to be managed quite well and shared amongst the different participants. One of the participants in the Young Palmer was a nurse, actually from the aged care facility, and she was petrified because she thought she was going to be asked to do everything in regards to Paula's needs. In fact, the group, in discussing this, the greatest fear they had was what happens if the ventilator breaks down. That was the one issue. So they approached the nurse and said, would you be able to actually assist us if that was to happen? And she said, is that the only thing you want me to do? I'm more than happy to do that. So shared responsibility provides an opportunity for people to also experience the total experience. Okay, so let's move on to our next finger. Okay, come on. Okay, come on, be brave. Anyway, okay. This finger is about who by two. And what we mean by who by two is that who do you ask and who does the asking? Who do you ask and who does the asking? Makes sense, doesn't it? Who do you ask? There's the right person, and there's also the wrong person to do the asking. And who does the asking? Who do you ask and who does the asking? Now, John and I have referred to this guy called John McKnight, and in that meeting in 1985, he had a significant impact on me, and this is one of the things that he taught me. And I'll imitate his American voice, all right? You know what? There are three types of people in the world. There are the hot wires and the power brokers. They're the people who are the movers and shakers in the community, the people with influence. And then there's the majority of the rest who would like to be hot wires and power brokers, but for whatever reason they're not there yet. And then there's the no done goods. And you know what? That was a turning point for me, because in my work in community inclusion, I've been trying to convert the no done goods. The individuals, the families, the services, the government departments, whether it be local, state or federal, I was out to get them. And John McKnight said to me, you know what, Rick? He said, I've only known you for a few minutes, but what a waste. Isn't that a great line? What a waste. And he was dead right, you know, because what he was saying is, why would you want to waste your time on people who are not with you when there are people there waiting to be asked? The hot wires and the power brokers. So let's put that group aside, because guess what does have an impact? The success of what you do with the others. When you work with the power brokers and the people who would like to be power brokers, that's where the stories come from. And stories are the greatest teachers. So what McKnight's encouraging us here is to, let's identify the right people to do the asking. And these are some of the characteristics of the right people. So they're people who lead and have people who follow. You know the great line. People who lead and have people who follow. People with influence, people who are known and know others within their community, people who do what they say they will do, people who care, people who have ongoing tenure within their community. That last point is particularly relevant in Townsville, because Townsville is a very transient community with Defence Force, university, public service. People come and go all the time. You know, there's a risk in some ways in investing in a person who's only going to be there for a short term, for a whole lot of reasons. So we need to go looking for people who have all those characteristics, but people who are also going to be around. Any other characteristics that you would think would be one that a good power broker or hotwire would have that's not there? Yes. Sorry?
Good listener.
Good listener? Yep, yep. Because unless you listen well, you're not going to understand why it's being asked for in the first place and what they're asking for. You're at risk of jumping to conclusions, and that may be actually not in the best interests of what the person's wanting to do. What else? Very good point. Your name is Susan? Susan, good. Well done, Susan. Any others? If you say something, I'll also give you praise. Yes?
I guess people with tenure know lots of people, but then that comes as a third point there. They've got some sort of...
Yes, that's right. Yep, yep, yep. Good. One more, we've got time for one more.
What about someone who's able to focus?
Yes, yes, yep. Remain focused and not be distracted by other aspects. Yep.
People who are living the experience of what it might be for us.
Yes, people with lived experience. It's really interesting where, with some of the groups in the community that I've sort of worked with, you know, they say, oh, look, we haven't got any experience of disability. And I think, well, look at your membership. There's evidence of disability within that club or organisation or whatever, where people are contributing well, etc. So sometimes we need to actually identify people's existing capacity already. So hot wires and power brokers is what I go looking for. Remember that comment about some people are waiting? Not everybody. Some people are waiting to be asked. We need to go looking for the some. And when and where. Now, when is the right time and where is the right place to do the asking? The answer's in the room. That means the answer's in this room. So where is the right place and when is the right time? Sorry?
Now and here. Perhaps now.
Perhaps now. Now here, yep, yep. Well, they need to be careful that you don't rush into it. Because asking prepared is about being prepared. And sometimes when we rush into it, we think, oh, here's a great opportunity now, but it may not be the best time. It may not even be the best person. So to step back and do some planning. Dinner time is not a good time to make an inquiry if a person is there. Yep,
Being thoughtful about other demands or people in context, so that the person that you're asking is at a time and a place where they'll be able to focus on what they're not distracted from.
Absolutely. Very good point. Very good point. I worked with a minister at one stage in trying to create some connection occurring, and I said, can you tell me a time where you will not be distracted or not be interrupted? So I gave him the opportunity to give me the best time and best environment to do the negotiations. What about where you do the asking? Sorry?
That's a big thing. And usually in private.
Yeah.
Not in front of a room of people where people are intimidated or influenced in any way.
Yeah. And that's right. And also where they're in control and they're in power of the situation. So I'm trying to, once again, when I spoke to that minister, I said, can I come to your study? Because that was his place. Not to the office that I was in. I wanted to enable him to be in control and relax. So, we need to think about when is the best time and where is the best place to actually negotiate that with. And the final one is the issue around safeguarding. And I suppose what we're we're saying there is that things will go wrong, won't they? So, safeguarding is the protection of one's principles and practices through being consciously aware of what may and will go wrong and have strategies in place to reduce the harm or at best remove the harm altogether. So they're the 5 fingers. Okay? It's not rocket science, is it? But it does need some attention and does need some preparation. Now, assuming that I've been very successful in teaching you the art of asking in a very short time, what I'm going to do now is Emma's going to share with you a card. Now, this card, I don't want you to be frightened by it. It's a quote by Germaine Greer. I've given this out at a men's group meeting. It wasn't really the best quote to... But I think the quote that Germaine Greer is saying here is one of the most powerful quotes. Everything that is could be otherwise. Now, you may or may not know me very well, but, you know, I'm a bit optimistic. But somebody said, oh, Rick, you know, you've got a problem with this quote because it can also be the opposite, can't it? The otherwise could be harm. So we need to be very clear about what we're working towards. Everything that is could be otherwise. Now, this is your homework. Here's an example. On your back of your card, I want you to make a commitment to action. Now, this is the action that, for example, I may have written. I will be asked prepared so as to assist Chris to be welcomed, supported, encouraged, acknowledged, and rewarded as an assistant at the local bike repair business. I want you to make a commitment to prepare yourself and participate in an asking act. What is an asking act that you can actually work towards? And by the way, this isn't actually about big picture stuff. It could be asking the local shopkeeper to start building a relationship.
It's actually an interesting thing you're asking us to do here at the moment because many of us are probably thinking about a family member.
Yes.
You know, and we actually may not be the right people
Absolutely.
to do the asking.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
So being asked prepared is challenging the assumption that you may be the right person, but who is the right person? So in the work that we do, for example, we will go looking, in fact, not surprising, but we may look for 10 people around another person's life, and we would ask ourselves the question, who is the best person to do the asking? And quite often it might be a person of that same age group, or that same interest, or whatever. So who is the right person to be asking the right thing at the right time, and consistently so? All right, how'd you go? Now, does anybody want to share it? Yes. And your name is? Renee. Thank you, Renee. Let's give Renee a hand, everybody. Oh, sorry, you may not have heard me. Let's give Renee a hand. Now, Renee feels very important to her.
Am I working? Oh, yeah. I belong to an RDA group, and there's this constant friction in the committee and in the group with certain things, and I want to bring something up. I know it's going to cause a massive stir, and I'm going to be, you know, ostracised, if you like, but it needs to be done, and nobody else is going to do it. I don't really want to do it, but I feel I have to do it. And again, maybe I'm not the right person to do it, but there doesn't seem to be much choice. So I want this individual to just listen to what I'm saying without having a big turn over it.
Yep. So when you think of the hand again, the why is really important here, isn't it? Because that's the motivator. Why you feel you need to say it.
Yeah.
That could be by way of a story, to actually soften the actual introduction to what may be a hard issue. You know, what are you going to be actually asking for? And, you know, are there other people who may support you within that group that you may or you may not be?
Behind the door, perhaps, but
Yeah, okay. So you can use the fingers in some ways as a bit of a checklist of, you know, is there anything that I've perhaps missed or whatever? So,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it gives me nightmares thinking about this, but
Yeah.
it's really stewing over quite a bit, so I'm going to have to...
The other thing is that you don't have to be alone in that. You can actually talk to people outside of the
Yep.
group to get their advice and guidance and support and encouragement.
Yeah.
And there's a few good. Do you live in Devon?
No, I live in Mudgee.
You Mudgee. Okay, Mudgee. Okay. Have they got a good bottle shop?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, call upon them too. So.
Yeah, afterwards.
Yeah. All right. Well, Renee, can you come out here, please? This creates a lot of interest now because it becomes quite competitive. Congratulations for being willing to share your story. Now we have time for one more sharing. Normally there's a high level of interest here because I know they'll get a prize too. So, yes.
I obviously have a disability. I have experience in a certain field, and I want to use the hand as a tool to prepare to ask to be given a chance for a job. I'm finding it very, very hard to, as I said, I've got the experience, the education and everything as a disability employment officer, but not sure how to go about. I have asked,
Yes.
but the asking doesn't seem to be received in the right manner. Yesterday was a very tumultuous day for me because I would like a role in the community, and have been banging my head against the wall trying to find a role. So I have taken up volunteer roles, but now I feel that I think I'll be able to use the hand method over the weekend to develop a story and a process to come up with a way to elaborate on the reasons why I should be given a chance.
Yes. Excellent. Good. Well done. Anne, isn't it? Is that right? Anne?
And
Annette. Sorry, Annette. I could only read half of your name badge there, so
sorry,
I'm
I
going
don't look at any of them.
I'm going to present you with a glass half empty, half full. All right, I think that's enough from me. I think I've gone over time again, haven't I? So, but thank you very much. There's a copy of the paper that's written on the art of asking, I think, in the website, in the Family Advocacy website, if you're interested. It goes for about 7 or 8 pages or something, but just captures the essence of the art of asking. So thank you for giving me your hand, and I wish you all the very best. But can I just ask you to be as prepared in the future? So thank you very much.
We do have 5 minutes, and until they finish next door, we can't really go back in. Are there some more questions, Belinda?
It's not a question, it's a kind of a point for discussion about how you know whether you are the right person, to, whether what you may be best when you're asking for something for yourself, when the motivation is something for yourself or something for your family member.
Yes.
The question about whether that direct role is one about making the ask or asking an asker.
Yes.
Might be a preliminary step, because sometimes, just an observation and for other people's kind of feedback and discussion, sometimes when you ask things for yourself or for someone who everyone knows, your own child or something like that, perhaps you're putting yourself in an extremely vulnerable position that other people
may feel uncomfortable to not accept, but it kind of just adds a dynamic of potential hurt and potential changing the nature of a relationship. Whereas if you ask an asker, I don't know, for my sense, I think that's where I would prefer that it exposes me to less potential hurt and allows the other person the dignity of kind of not necessarily accepting but remaining in relationship anyway.
Yes, absolutely. A fantastic point. In fact, there's a great quote that I heard at one stage, that often we need, and often our role may be a filter against rejection.
I just wonder, in my history with my daughter, if I have relied on someone else to get me something that I need or want for her, I run the risk of that person not having the same motivation and the same passion to really push the case. So to me, I'm sort of thinking, I feel like I have to do it myself because only I have the motivation.
Perhaps the funds needed there, because if that person that you're thinking of knows why, that in fact becomes the motivation of that partnership. One of the best experiences, Anne Greer might be known to some of you here, a very dynamic mother and coordinator of an excellent service in Townsville. She is often asked by family members to be present when meeting with the principal of the local school. She's one hell of a tough cookie. So some of you may have experienced, the principal's having to deal with another whinging parent. Well, Anne takes that responsibility and she actually does the management of that discussion. And for some of you, you might have seen Cher in the film Mask, where she's having a negotiation with the principal, and the principal's not cooperating. And Cher says, well, I need to go now, goodbye. And she hands the principal a card. And he said, oh, but this isn't your card, it's a lawyer's card. And she says, that's the next person that we make in contact with you. So, sometimes we need to be very aware of who does the actual asking on our behalf and who is the best person to do that. But on the other hand, let's not underestimate the fact that people may also have the best capacity to do that if they're well prepared. So even the line, I hear that you're looking for new members, is a fantastic opening line, because governments will only fund those who have a membership. If you don't have membership, you don't get government funding. Any more questions?
It's not a question, it's just a bit of experience. Once I approached an old guy who has a horse and a carousel to give a ride to my son Nick, which loves that, and the guy said no.
Yeah.
And then I met him in presence of another person, and I explained to the other person what I asked the guy, and he said no. And the other person said, oh, he didn't hear you properly. And he asked him again, and he goes, yes.
That's a fantastic example, and we need to be aware of the dynamics of the experience. So,
We have to leave it there. So we've got another session starting now in the main auditorium again. We'll just leave it up to lunch. Thank you, Rick. Wonderful.